We are ready to start. Welcome everyone to the California Native Plant Certified Landscaper course being offered in conjunction with the United States Green Building Council LA, LADWP, and the California Native Plant Society. We would like to start with the land acknowledgement. Theodore Payne sits on the village of Wicagna, the place of thorns, and we acknowledge our neighbors in all directions, the Wikangwatam, now known as Tataviam, the Shumash, Kitanamuk, Serrano, and Toma Gabrielino Quiche nations. So thank you for everyone, and Claire, the floor is yours.
Hi. Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that I am on Kumeyaay land. I'm in northern Baja right now, specifically on San Antonio Nequa, their village. And I think it's important with the context since we are going to be talking about native plants. And it's really important to recognize those kind of indigenous folks that are the carriers of the knowledge of maintaining the plants that we're going to be talking about maintaining. So thanks, Brenda. And if you guys want to find out maybe where you are located, there's a website called Native Land. I think it's native-land.ca. But anyway, thank you for that. And just, I guess, like quick intro about me, and then we can kind of introduce all of you guys. I was born in Southern California, and I work on both sides of the border in Southern California and Northern Baja. And I kind of got to native plants through vegetables. I was a culinary gardener for a restaurant in Baja. And I mean, I've always been a plant person, but yeah, I just got really into it while cultivating vegetables. And now I work independently and do kind of garden installs and create, some light design work, but mostly installing gardens and maintaining them for clients, and trying to create resilient, kind of sustainable ecosystems with those landscapes that I install. So that's using either California native plants or rainwater capturing features, maybe a vegetable garden here, here and there, basically just trying to create habitat for all the living organisms around. So that's sort of what I try to do. And the last, I don't know, 5 years or something, done quite a few installs with both in San Diego and in Los Angeles, utilizing the rebate programs in those counties. So I'm pretty familiar with them. And yeah, so I mean, I'm by no means the expert, but I can share with you my experiences, and I know you guys probably have your own amount of experience as well. Just to start, just so that we can kind of do some roll call, but also just to get to know all of you in this format that's kind of hard to get to know people in. If we could I'll just kind of go through the roster list that I have. And maybe you can just, say your name, because I'll probably pronounce it wrong. And then, maybe where in LA you're located, and how you want to incorporate native plants into the work you're currently doing. So yeah, like where are you at in LA, and how do you want to incorporate native plants into your current work? So I'll just kind of go down the line. I have here Elise.
Yes. Hi, my name's Elise Langlois. I'm actually in Orange County.
Okay.
And I am a landscape horticultural consultant for a company called Monarch Environmental. We work with large HOA communities and work directly with a lot of the, the big player landscapers, the Brightview, Park West, O'Connell, some of these larger companies. So my background is in horticulture. I studied horticulture at Cal Poly. Worked at a wholesale nursery and done account management for landscape as well. But really the reason I wanted to do this class is to brush up on some of my native plant knowledge, and then also just be able to bring it to these HOA communities. We see the same thing used over and over, a very commercial landscape, and hoping to bring more diversity to these landscapes and improve these ecosystems.
Nice. Okay. So Elise, next is Andrea. Andrea,
Hi, I'm Andrea Galvan. Can you hear me?
yes.
Hi, I'm Andrea Galvan. I work at a developer. I do public art mostly, but I would like to include and incorporate a lot of native landscaping into that and to work with artists that are ecologically conscious. And a lot of our landscaping is based around native plants, and I'd like to better work with our landscaping design teams.
Cool. What about Becky? Becky Tanger, are you here? Okay, I'm gonna move ahead. Chaz Perea? No? Okay, what about Diane?
Hello?
Yes, hi Diane.
Hi. I'm sorry, 1 second. Hi, my name is Diane and I work for the Department of Water and Power as a senior gardener. And this class is being offered, and this is definitely something that's in my, or that I work around as I work as a gardener, and all of our facilities have been drought tolerant, using all these different drought tolerant plants. So this is going to be an interesting class.
Cool. Yeah, you can start to incorporate some natives into that drought tolerant palette. Okay. Oh wait, that was Diane. Oops. I'm sorry. I'm kind of making some notes so I know who everybody is. So next I have Fred. Fred, are you here? Okay. What about Hector?
Hey, hello. It's just me and my father. We have a gardening company, like around 100 or so houses. Mostly maintenance. Customers, they want irrigation or native plants or like whatever like they want us to do, we do it. But I want to learn how to learn how to what's it called? Maintain native plants, and broaden my knowledge of plants and so on.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you do typically, like currently, do you include a lot of native plants in your maintenance jobs?
I do somehow.
Okay.
I do various it's because it's just so much,
Yeah. No, I'm sure
Yeah,
people ask you to do.
roses,
Right.
lawns, anything.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. What about Henry? Are you here, Henry? Okay. No Henry. So what about Joe?
I'm here.
Hi,
Can you hear
Joe.
me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I work for LADWP as well, like Diana. And basically, I'm taking this course. There's a promotion coming up that I'm excited about. Hopefully, this will help me to senior
Got it.
gardener.
Right. So a little more professional development.
Right.
Okay. How about John? Are you here, John Willett? John?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'm John. I'm also with LADWP as a gardener, and I actually shopped at Theodore Payne for a while. I've been wanting to take this class, so since I had the opportunity to take it now, I'm going for it. And we are very excited about incorporating more native plants in our drought tolerant palette. We started using, we've been using Cleveland sage for a while, but that's kind of standard. So trying to include more monardellas and maybe some more of the different penstemons and that. So I'm excited.
Cool. Okay. Jolynn Pineda. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Jolynn Pineda Brock. Okay. How about Julio? Julio, are you here?
Hi, this is Julio. I work for Brightview Landscapes. I grew up in Venice, Venice Beach. I moved up to the Bay Area, lived there for about 8 years. I became a Bay-friendly certified landscaper up north in and this is a good opportunity to learn more about the native plants here. I've only been in the landscape business about 3 years. So I handle pretty big account. I manage Grand Park, LA, SEE sites, South Pasadena School District. So, everyone's looking to upgrade their landscape due to the drought. So this
Yeah.
is some good knowledge to have, especially.
So you've only been in Southern California for the last 3 years?
No, I lived up north. I grew up here, moved up north
Oh,
for
okay.
8 years, and moved back in December.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks. All right. Next, I have Casey. Casey, are you here? Any Caseys? All right. How about Larry?
Mama's on her way home. Go
Julio,
play.
I can still hear you if you want to go ahead and mute yourself, unless you want us to hear you. Okay, wait. So no Casey, no Larry, I believe. But Larry, shout out if you are here. Luis? Luis, are you here? Okay, I don't hear anybody. What about Marie? Wow, it's like I feel like I have the wrong roster. Mercedes, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. My name is Mercedes Perez. I work for a small landscape design firm. My landscape architect / designer is very knowledgeable about plant material and really good with native plants, drought tolerant. I like to and looking forward to learn more so I can be up to par and be able to help her more. I do a lot of the managing in the office, but I'm more and more getting involved onto going to the nurseries, picking out the right plants, being able to show our clients what's best for their garden and, be able to have drought tolerant plant material within the gardens. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot about natives and be able to help out more in our office.
Cool. Yeah, so like maybe helping out with, do you do, so you're just support for the design firm kind of, or do you do designs also?
Yes, no, I'm more like support for the
Okay.
firm. I do everything from CAD to
Yeah.
invoice to books to, it's just 2 of us. It's my sister and myself.
Okay,
And
cool.
we have 3 more employees, but a lot of the times it's me looking for the plant material that we would want to use for our clients and putting the palettes together.
Right.
And like I said, my designer is the one that would give me a list, but then, I have the liberty of saying, how about we add this or incorporate this or that? And I like to be able to say, with an educative reasoning, this would go good because,
Nice. Okay.
the
Totally. I get
palette
it.
or the drought, or, they're really good in this environment or whatnot. So
Yeah.
just looking forward to learning more about natives.
Cool. Great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. Natalie? You here?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm a school teacher. I'm a naturalist and farm teacher at a school in Topanga, and I'm kind of new to Los Angeles. My background, I lived off the grid for about 10 years in the Cuyama Valley at a place called Quail Springs, and my knowledge of native plants is mostly as a craftsperson. So there's a lot of opportunities at my school on the 21-acre campus for implementing anything that I learn here. So
Nice. Cool. Yeah, Quail Springs is a very cool spot. Natasha, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm a student right now at PCC, but I jump around from a gig to gig. I've worked in the past doing habitat restoration. I just finished a gig doing botany surveys. I know a lot about, I guess, like the restoration side of native plants, but not a lot about landscaping and in people's homes and backyards. And so I just want to take this class for my own professional development.
Nice. Yeah. I know what you mean. There is a difference between like restoration projects and like landscaping. They kind of, especially if it's like aesthetically minded, you know, for kind of a client in their home. So yeah, there's definitely a difference there. What about Noe? Or I suppose it could be Noe. Noe, are you here? Last name Gomez Romero. Okay. What about Peg?
Hi, come here, my little sugar. We pet the kitty. You did? Yeah. Cool.
Wait, is this Peg or is this someone else?
No, this is someone else.
Oh.
I mean, I'm Peg, but I don't know who
Okay.
that was.
Got it. Okay.
Good and swim? Yeah.
Elise, I think your mic is on still.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries. I was
Hi.
excited about your really excited intro there, Peg, but
I know.
don't worry, you don't have to live up to it.
I'm actually a location scout for commercial advertising, but I've been trying to transition into something more meaningful. And I did take a permaculture design course at Quail Springs for 2 weeks. I live on a ranch in the high desert that was homesteaded in 1903, and none of the plants here are natives. And since the water table is getting so low, I just want to do something to make this place sustainable and maybe branch out from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so two Quail Spring shout outs there. Now, are you high desert? Are you like in Joshua Tree? What kind of high desert?
Barstow.
Barstow, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about Philip? Are you here? Philip Marino? Okay. Rolando? Anyone by that name? Okay, I'll keep going. What about Sergio or Sergio? Are you here?
Hello, this is Sergio.
Okay.
My name is Sergio Morelos. I'm from Los Angeles. I work for the Department of Water and Power, and I'm joining this class so I can expand my knowledge, and that's it.
Okay, cool. Professional development.
Yes, thank you.
And then Makita, who is with US Green Building Council, who is kind of like the host for the Zoom, but she's also taking the course along with us. She's kind of like helping me behind the scenes, I guess, with the Zoom stuff, but she's also one of you guys. So Makita, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Makita Birdsong, and I am the training coordinator at US Green Building Council, LA. A little bit about USGBC LA. We are about people, passionate, practical, informed professionals and advocates who work together to transform Southern California into a more sustainable region for all. USGBC LA is the best place for anyone to learn the why, who, and how of living sustainably, because business as usual is no longer an option. Volunteers and members believe in a sustainable built environment, gaining education, being exposed to innovation, and taking impactful action. I think I may have said before, I am the training coordinator at USGBC LA. And we also have one of our Green Building Core interns on the call as well, Lydia Oliver, who will also be assisting with hosting these sessions. So Lydia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lydia Olivier, and I just joined USG Green Building Council's Green Building Corps this year. I just graduated with a regenerative studies degree from the Lau Center at Cal Poly Pomona. And I wish this was around years ago when I planted so many native plants in LAUSD and they all got ripped out. But I'm self-taught in native plants, and I'm a big avid, person for them. So.
Cool, thank you. Is there anyone that has showed up now that's sitting there quietly who hasn't gotten to introduce themselves and feels brave enough to unmute themselves and introduce themselves?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so just your name.
Hello,
and
my name is Anna.
and how you plan
Anna
to incorporate. I'm sorry. I think there's a little bit of a delay. But go ahead. Introduce
Sorry,
yourself.
my computer's lagging a little. My name is Enna. I live in Lincoln Heights in Los Angeles. I'm newer to LA. I moved here in the pandemic. I'm from Virginia. And I'd like to get to know California native plants because I do landscaping, kind of like gig landscaping. And I will start teaching gardening in the LA United School District. So I'd like to incorporate natives in the schools I'm teaching. And I'm also taking a permaculture design certification through Oregon State. So curious about Quail Springs. I've heard about it. And I'm just interested in naturalistic landscapes. So thanks.
Cool, thank you.
Now, what name did you use to register?
And there might be a delay, but feel free to.
I use my name, Enna, ENNA.
Cool. Well, you guys will figure that out in the chat. You have Brenda and stuff. Anyone else besides Enna that didn't get to introduce themselves? Last kind of call there for intros.
I am Marie. I'm sorry I wasn't able to connect earlier.
It's okay.
And I live here in mid-city Los Angeles, and I work for TPF. And the reason why I'm taking this class is because I definitely want to deepen my knowledge of native plants. I've been working there for a little bit, and did the transition from doing marketing for advertising in other parts of the world to come into this because it was more meaningful. And also want to take this class because I definitely want to learn more about all of you, because I am creating new materials for this class and for TPF, and want to have a deeper understanding of the plants and also the people that need more materials in order to communicate better with them.
Cool, thanks, Marie. It sounds like there's like the Quail Springs people, you guys should like hit each other up in the DM chat, and then also transitioning. I think there's two of you folks that have transitioned from advertising. You guys should become friends. Anyone else?
Yes, I just got in and I didn't get called. My name is Henry Haddad.
Oh, yeah. I have you on my list.
You did?
Go ahead,
okay,
Henry.
Good. Okay. So yeah, I work for California State Parks. I'm excited, interested to expand my experience, knowledge with Theodore Payne Foundation with native plants.
Got it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we had someone one of the last cohorts who was also from California State Parks. Anyone else that's not? Oh, I just see that Noe and is entering, and I know he's on the, she's there on the list. Noe, you just showed up. Are you there? I guess I could do this all the time. I'm gonna move ahead. I could keep going doing introductions. But yes, so I guess just to start, we have like just a little bit about the format. Brenda obviously went over all of the details kind of, and you have that email that she sent out with the different classes. But essentially, yeah, we're gonna have these 8 courses. These are the topics we're gonna cover. There are 2 optional in-person workshops that are not listed here, but they will fall after one of them is for irrigation and one of them is for pruning. So that class will fall on the Saturday after the first irrigation class and the Saturday after the last, final class. And you can sign up for those on the Eventbrite in your email. On the second, we have 2 irrigation classes. On the second one, we'll have a LADWP rep that will we'll answer any of your questions about any of the rebates. So if you have been curious about them, save your questions for them then, because they have all the answers for those and they're very helpful. So essentially the format of the classes themselves, we have 2 hours together, we have basically like an hour, a little less than an hour and a half of lecture, because in the beginning of the classes, we'll usually do like 15 to 20 minutes of homework review every class. There's homework, yes. And then we'll have a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle. And then we'll try to make space for like a 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. of each class. I don't always nail it and have the 15 minutes, but that being said, I have a hard time reading the chat at the same time as doing the lecture. It's just, I've never really found a really good flow with it. So if there's something you have a question about that's regarding the slide itself or something, or you really want to ask a question, feel free to just raise your hand or interrupt if the question is kind of like pertinent to the material that's on the screen. But if it can wait till at the end, that's preferable. But yeah, so anyway, that's basically the structure of the class. Yeah, I don't really check the chat. What else? Oh, yeah, so you probably, I think only 3 of you have actually gotten the workbook, the physical copy, but you have the workbook in the digital form that you can download. But essentially, each of the classes, there's an outline for the class that's in the handout or in the handbook. And then also for each class, there is like a couple of handouts. Almost every single class has a handout or two. And I really recommend you check them out because many of the handouts cover things that we just can't go into detail on in the class, or we just don't cover in much detail, but the handout covers in more detail. So definitely don't ignore them because they are additional resources that are super helpful. Like for today's class, which is just the value of the certificate and kind of the intro to the garden's life and time frame. The handouts associated with this class are the about kind of the intro to native plants, about them and what they are. If you have no idea what native plants are, in a nutshell, they're basically the plants that were here in California prior to European contact. But it gives you all the kind of interesting tidbits, like how they're different from California friendly and drought tolerant plants, which typically are not native plants. They are just, tolerant of drought or something like that, but that doesn't mean they are native to California. So there's that handout that's all about California natives. Then you also have, I believe, the schedule for the whole course. And then there is a planting guide, which is really great. It just is kind of step-by-step how to just plant a native plant, what you should do, all the steps, dig the hole, put some water in, drain it, then plant it, mulch, and the kind of subsequent watering that you should plan for. So there's the planting guide that's really helpful. And then lastly, the last handout for this class is, I guess I can move my slide actually, is the lawn removal guide, or the lawn removal and lawn alternative guide, something like that. But that's really helpful because we don't really go into the step-by-steps and the details behind removing your lawn. And if you are applying for that rebate, that is the LADWP's rebate of turf replacement program, that little handout guide is really helpful. It kind of goes through the steps to smothering whatever lawn you might have existing and the best practices for establishing native plants in a former lawn situation. So yeah, those would be the handouts for today, but every class has some handouts. Oh, and homework. I will show you the homework at the end of class, but if you can't, you miss a class or you forget what the homework is, in this outline for the class, every outline has the homework listed at the bottom. So if you ever are lost about what the homework is, make sure to check your outline for that class. It'll have the homework. And the homework you'll send to me and not Brenda. I'll give you guys my email at the end, but we don't want to overload Brenda's inbox with homeworks. So please remember to send all your homeworks to me and any questions regarding the material. If it's a question regarding picking up the handbook or something specific to Theodore Payne's office or something like that, then yes, by all means, email Brenda. So getting into it, I guess, just for today, we'll talk about essentially just, what is the program, what are the benefits of it? And we'll then kind of do an overview of just a typical kind of native plant garden from install to maturity or establishment, and the time frame and what to expect. So we'll just kind of do intro all around. So this is a picture of what your certificate looks like, more or less. You'll get one of these when you finish this course. And just some kind of overview, the curriculum that we are using in this course is kind of a standardized professional curriculum that's aimed at training landscape professionals in native plant maintenance. It's not a design course. We don't touch on a lot of design things. I'm only saying that because in the past, I know a lot of students had asked about that. And it really is aimed at maintenance workers. And that's because the program's aimed at trying to foster behavior changes in this industry, right? So trying to move towards more sustainable practices in landscape maintenance. So that's kind of the aim. And then all of the content's just based on the kind of best practices with input from like the most knowledgeable practitioners in the field, and also all of these related organizations like California Native Plant Society, LADWP, US Green Building Council, and obviously Theodore Payne Foundation. So it's all of kind of the heavy hitters in native plant and kind of green infrastructure also. So just quickly, I guess I'll just kind of say, like, what is the benefit of the certificate? Obviously just job qualification. Some of you are just new to native plants. So having a credential that or a certificate that says you're qualified to do this service is a real help, right? But also some of you that are already in this field of landscaping, but maybe just want the job advancement part, which means like being able to, command a higher price for your services or get a raise. Someone mentioned that, looking for a promotion. So of course that's a valuable thing. The professional development side of it. And then just the marketing, obviously marketing yourself as a certified native plant landscaper is huge, because you're basically assuring whatever client that you are, utilizing the water-wise, safe, and effective maintenance of native plant in their native plant garden. So you're just kind of, you can market yourself that way. And it's just kind of like, a signifier of quality because you've met the requirements of the program, obviously. So I'm sure you guys all understand that. But aside from kind of like the personal gains that we have, there's also this kind of bigger picture to the program, which is supporting California native plants in the landscape and supporting the change in the industry that I was talking about to move towards sustainability. And that's because we already know that as the climate's warming up, we obviously are seeing water become more scarce and more expensive, and counties are already cracking down on folks' water use in their yards and landscapes. So people are already feeling that. And even, some folks mentioned that in the intros, like, as people ask for these things, we need to have a qualified and capable crew of people that know how to handle or maintain native plants. So we're expecting there to be a, more and more demand for native plant landscapes because of the water issue and, the drought issue that's just become the new normal. So with that more demand, we want to have this folks that are trained for that. So just trying to create the or bridge that gap between demand and supply, essentially. So there's definitely that part. And it's also not just about water. I mean, that's obviously very important in Southern California, but there's also what we do in California that is really important. And that's because California is considered like a biodiversity hotspot. And this map kind of helps you see why. And that's because, so basically the cooler colors, the blues in California, you can see they indicate higher numbers of native plant species that are endemic to that area. So that means endemic means that the plants are, they don't grow anywhere else. So they only grow in that area. And you can see the blue means like much higher than 200 species that are endemic to that area. And you can see that central coast of California has a really high number of endemic species. And then you go over to any of those states that are all white, and you can see that they have no endemic species. So that means they're plants that grow in that zone, grow in a lot of different zones also. So not a lot of not high endemicism, I guess we would say. But California has a really high number, and not just, well, anyway, California has a really high number, and it's unique in that a third of the native species, of all the native species in California, don't occur anywhere else on the planet. So it is very unique and special. And so when we plant native plants, we're supporting that biodiversity and helping helping that. And there's research that actually shows that native wildlife actually prefers native plants. So that's not to say that, bees can't, utilize other plants that aren't native, but they actually prefer native plants, and you'll see higher numbers and more diverse species of insects and pollinators and wildlife that utilize native plants. So when you plant a native plant garden, you're also creating habitat, not just saving water and X, Y, and Z and all the great, other parts of it. So California native plants or gardens, I should say, are really critical to the future of sustainability and ecological minded gardening. I should see if I have any other notes on here that I wanted to mention. I think that's it really. So basically the program, what it is, I mean, I've kind of mentioned all these things, but it's the only program that exclusively focuses on California natives, which is rad. And like I said, you can improve your marketability. It can make your resume stand out. It just lets people know that you have experience and knowledge in this field, this specialty. And then it's obviously backed by Theodore Payne Foundation, California Native Plant Society, and US Green Building Council. And like I was mentioning, these are the most respected names in native plant gardening and also green infrastructure. So having that kind of seal of approval is really helpful for you guys that end up with the certification. How do you, right. So once you have a certificate, basically what you get at the end of the program, you get a certificate, as I mentioned, and you also get kind of like decal stickers that you can, put on your work vehicle or use in whatever way you want to. I believe you also get like the JPEG or whatever version of the decal that you can use on, whatever social media profiles your business has, or business cards or brochures or proposals, however you, put yourself out there, you can use the logo for that, the certificate logo in addition to that. And you can, of course, put the decals on your vehicle or skateboard or whatever whatever you like to put stickers on. And obviously being proud of how hard you worked to earn a certificate. I mean, I know that sounds so like chintzy and kind of corny, but it's also like you guys are taking time out of your schedules to do some professional development. And I feel like it's always good to like just pat yourself on the back for like doing a thing. At least I have to do that. So there's that. And then lastly, as a certificate holder, like, once you have that, you can contact Theodore Payne, or maybe your employer, or if you're working with a client, they can contact Theodore Payne to verify that you're certified. They won't list you on their website. It's a liability issue, but essentially it'll just, but if someone wants that certification that that verification that you're indeed certified, you can always contact Theodore Payne for that confirmation. So that is, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that's like, where are we at? Yeah, we could do a 5-minute break already, because I'm just going to talk about the life of a garden after this. This is a good natural spot. But before I take a break, I just wanted to, oh, Noe, you introduced yourself on the chat. Great. Noe, you work for LADWP and you're a senior gardener, and you work on converting LADWP facility landscapes to drought tolerant landscapes for water conservation. Great, so another LADWP folk in there. Yeah, let's do then 5 minutes. We'll come back here at, let's say 5:48. And yeah, we'll talk about the life of a garden.
Thank you, Claire. And I want to also remind everyone to check the chat. I'm here, I am monitoring, and I've sent some of you direct messages asking for emails, etc. Because we need to keep the rosters ready, and the class is being recorded. So once it's over, we will email you a copy of it, but I can't if I don't have an email. So please, please, please check the chat. Thank you.
All right, so 5:48. We'll come back to now the life of a garden. Essentially, we're just going to do like kind of go through the example of kind of what to expect in terms of maintenance scheduling and maybe some of the maintenance activities to expect with a garden over the course of its installation to essentially what we would consider maturity or once it's established. So just I guess to start, a garden is essentially, well, the most variable part of your garden is your plants, right? You're not going to worry about like the DG pathway and, whatever rocks and whatnot you put in there. It's the plants that are the kind of most variable factor. And particularly with native plants, it's important to give them extra support in the first couple years. We typically say that they're established after 3 or 4 years, and you want to give them enough support and kind of set that in the first couple years, because that sets the pattern for their health over their lifetime. So if you do a kind of bad job of watering and they just never really get off the ground in that first year, you neglect them in that first year, sometimes they just never really recover, or they just never get to that kind of aesthetic, healthy, attractive, stable state that you're looking for. And that's kind of the plus side of native plants, right? Is that eventually they get established and that they can take longer stretches without water. And so the first couple years is the time when you kind of put in the effort so that you can ensure success later down the line. And that's because it's especially important with native plants. I mean, obviously this is kind of the case with any living thing that you deal with, but with native plants, they have not been bred for nearly as long of time to, they haven't been bred for the same types of neglect that some of the more traditional stuff that you find at like Home Depot or whatever, they're not like the exotic species that we typically see in gardens. And they're not really bred for that type of neglect. So you can't just kind of pop them in the ground, water them and like walk away. There is there's a bit more maintenance in them in their early years, and then they start to become more resilient. So when I always try to remind people in the first couple of years, there's quite a bit of maintenance for native plants, and then they start to get pretty resilient after that. And it's just some moderate pruning and stuff for aesthetics usually after that. But you definitely need to be watering and maintaining them in that first year or two. So definitely something to keep in mind. I guess, yeah, I'll just go forward then with this. Before you install so I was talking, we'll start with the installation and move through the years. But before you do any garden install, especially, I mean, anywhere in Southern California, there's some kind of rebate program essentially, but the ones offered through LADWP, you definitely want to check them out before you rip out the lawn or do anything, because particularly with the turf replacement program, you have to apply and then receive pre-approval, and then you can rip out your lawn. And if you apply after ripping out your lawn, you won't qualify for the program. So you definitely want to check out whatever rebates are offered before you start like getting out there and getting amongst it. Unless, you don't care about the rebate, or you're not going to qualify. So yeah, just a kind of reminder of the rebate programs. So just to, so starting with year one, like this is an install, you can see it's, bunch of soil moved around, some landscaping barriers and some flags marking out that the pathways and whatnot. The scheduling for this kind of thing, the first year, I mean, obviously this is install, but the first year of the garden's life, you're going to be doing probably the most frequent visits, which will be, typically weekly to semi-monthly, like weekly to twice a month, and visits of like 1 to 2 hours. So this would be considered kind of the more frequent visiting schedule, which makes sense because it's in its first year. This scheduling though, don't get too caught up like I need to be doing it weekly. This is going to really depend on the client, on the size of the garden, whatever, there's a lot of different factors, but just generally speaking, you probably be visiting more frequently early on, because the plants require a bit more attention than plants that are well established. So just kind of keeping that in mind, and don't get so stuck on the actual scheduling strategies that are listed. some of the activities you might be doing in the, at least installation activities in year one. Well, clearly having a plant list would be really nice. Having that at install would be great. Knowing exactly what plants you're putting in the ground, always helpful for later and, you know, kind of record keeping, and also just to, you know, help tell the client whatever you're planting. I would say that creating berms and swales slash any kind of rain basin, infiltration basin, any of that kind of changing of the topography of the landscape would be done at the install. You're not going to be doing that after the fact. And I would say evaluating the runoff potential, which would be any kind of water that runs off of the roof, maybe any hardscape like a driveway or sidewalks or whatever. Evaluate that either prior to install or before you install all these infiltration basins. You want to know that if you're doing maybe a dry riverbed that connects to the downspout of the roof gutters, you want to know that the area that you're designating and the dry riverbed is the appropriate size or can handle what's coming. So I would definitely do that at installation or prior to. Mulching, very key. You definitely, some folks like to plant first and then mulch, and others like to mulch and then plant into the mulch. It's totally up to you. I've done both and don't have a strong preference, or don't have a good reason for my preference, I suppose. Also, you can see here the bottom, like on the right-hand side, there's some holes, but it looks like these holes are filled with water, but also within kind of a depression. So I think this is probably some kind of dry riverbed, or maybe some kind of infiltration basin where water will flow, like maybe the rain goes that way, or potentially just, you know, the topography is changed just for visual aesthetics even. But you can see the holes are filled. Those are the holes that the plants, these 1 gallon plants, are going to go into. One thing that's in your planting guide also, but it's always recommended, is to fill the hole with water that you plan to plant into. Fill it with water and let it drain completely. If you can do it multiple times or it's very dry, I would recommend doing it more than once, but at least if you can get one filling up of water and draining before you plant the plant, it'll go a long way to establishing the plant. It just like helps with the kind of rate of what is that called? Like taking, like the plant actually sticking. So, so yeah, water the holes like this person is doing, let them drain and then plant. So definitely doing that. It's just, I know lots of folks that have said that when they didn't do that, they just had less of a survival rate. So what it's doing is basically moistening the soil around the root ball, not just watering the root ball, right? Because that's the idea, is we really want to encourage the roots to move outward into the surrounding soil. That's actually what helps them get established and what allows them to eventually be able to take longer stretches without water. Also, sowing wildflowers is a great idea at installation. You can see a lot of these plants are 1 gallons, so they're not very big. And after an installation, the garden looks sort of bare, you know, there's not a lot of vegetation. So sowing wildflowers can help at least fill it in once, you know, early on, because the wildflowers are just kind of a temporary fill before the plants, you know, get up to size. And then there's staking potentially. This 5 gallon plant on the left-hand side, the larger one, doesn't have a stake in it that I can see, but many larger plants, you know, even like the 15 gallon ones, have, you know, a stake in it that's like, you know, tied really tightly to the trunk of the plant or to the main stem of the plant. Any of those stakes you want to remove. The stakes that are tied really tightly to the plant are really for the nursery setting, and that's so that they can move them around easily and they're not flopping over onto other plants. You want to take that out. You can still use stakes, but we recommend the kind of 2 stake method, which is kind of basically moving or placing 2 stakes out a little bit outside of the root ball of the plant, which would be basically the size of the pot. So in this case, you know, about 6 to 12 inches outside of 6 to 12 inches from the base of the stem. And then you'll wrap basically that green landscaping tape, you know, kind of just tie it loosely on each end of the of the stem. That sounds so confusing the way I said it, but essentially it allows you to have some light sway of the stem, as opposed to having a really rigid stem that's tightly wound to the stake. And that is because we want to actually encourage some light movement so the tree actually learns, or not, well, yes, learns, but also kind of reinforces its own strength and movement with some light wind. And in the case of like a really high wind event, it's still protected with the stakes that you've placed. You don't want it to be too rigid because essentially it's not really supporting, it's almost like weakening the tree because it's not giving it the movement it needs to actually strengthen on its own. I see that. Yeah, okay, Brenda's got the chat under control. I'm not gonna mess with that right now. Year one installation maintenance activities. So same kind of garden. You can see though now there's mulch in place. And like I was saying, it's kind of more mulch than it is plants. So the mulch is key, you know, for kind of suffocating any upcoming weeds that will want to come up, and also protecting the soil, the moisture content in the soil, and you know, all sorts of things. It decomposes over time, and that's what provides the fertility for those plants. The watering for your plants in that first year is going to be the most frequent. There's probably going to be a lot of hand watering involved, in fact. And the idea overall is basically kind of more frequent watering, and then you slowly taper off. And that's kind of until you get to establishment. And that's just kind of that's the most general one. Obviously, we have an irrigation class, so we'll talk about this more specifically. But generally speaking, it's a little bit more frequent early on, and you want to start to less so as we move forward in time. So the idea, though, is you're trying to encourage a healthy root system, which is an extensive one. You're trying to encourage the roots to move outward. And that you can, right now, basically, the reason why you have to water so frequently in the beginning is because the root ball is just whatever the size of the pot is, right? So the roots aren't extensive yet, so they can't reach out into other areas and hold on to that moisture. So we have to kind of like be helping them along. And that's why when you're watering natives, new ones especially, you really want to focus the water on that interface between where the root ball meets the kind of garden soil. So like the containers, the soil that it came in, that interface where it meets the actual soil that it's planted into, basically like the edge of the root ball. And you want to be focusing the water there, not just spraying right at the base of the plant, and focusing it there and a little bit outwards so that, again, the roots actually are encouraged to go out into those moist areas that are a little bit beyond its reach, because that's what we're trying to do here. So again, like you're basically going to want to water like around this plant, not just like right in the center of it, because we're really trying to get those, those roots established. You guys have probably heard this, or maybe not. There's like a idiom or whatever that's essentially regarding native plants. That's they say first year sleep, second year creep, and third year leap. And it's referring to this, in the first year, there's usually not a lot of above ground growth. The roots are kind of doing a lot of the growing. And then in the second year, you start to see some growth on the like above ground. And that's because the plant now has a larger root system, hopefully. And then in the third year, they say leap, which refers to like the more vegetative growth, and also kind of the fact that the plant just usually is getting up to be about its what's it called? It's like, you know, mature size. Of course, not all plants follow this like first year, second year, third year thing exactly. And in fact, faster growing plants tend to do the sleep, creep, leap all in 1 year even. So it's not something I would say like if you see something that's leaping in the first year, don't worry about it so much. It's more just so that you understand that the lack of above ground growth is early on in the plant's kind of phase, or early on in its life, is it getting established in the roots below. Let's see. So I was talking about watering. Yeah, edge of the, and then timing of year, just of course, you've probably all heard this, but this is kind of the time of year to start planting natives, you know, sometime in fall or at least winter, so that you can take advantage of the cooler temperatures and hopefully whatever rain might come. So that's the ideal time to plant natives. Obviously, you can plant them outside of that window. And there is a summer planting guide that is, I think, actually in the next class, or maybe the third. Anyway, well, there's a guide somewhere. It's not this class, but there is a summer planting guide for planting natives. And essentially, it's a little bit like the further inland you are, the more sensitive you might want to be about planting in the summer because it's a little more extreme of heat. But there's definitely ways to get around it. You can use shade cloths, planting early in the morning. There's lots of things. Weeding, oh gosh, weeding. Year one, weeding is so important. You really want to stay on top of weeding in the first 2 years, I'd say, because essentially weed seeds, the number of weed seeds are just ever present in the soil, in all soils. And basically they're just in the soil, just waiting for a little bit of sun, a little bit of soil disturbance, and a little bit of water. And all of those things are that happen when you create a new garden. You're moving some soil around, you're watering the new plants. You've probably removed a bunch of vegetation that was on top or whatever, and that leaves the soil exposed to more light. So you're going to see a flush of new weeds typically after you plant some natives. If you've smothered it well and maybe did the kind of lasagna mulching with the cardboard and the mulch, you'll probably see a little bit less, but there's always something that gets through. So you just want to stay on top of it in the first 2 years, because the same way we're trying to establish the native plants, you don't want to establish your weed seed bank. So you don't want to let them go to seed. Make sure they're not seeding anything, because you don't want to add more weeds to it. And you also don't want them to get established and actually outcompete the native plants. You want to give the native plants as much of an advantage as you can so that they start to shade out the area, and then there's way less of a problem of weeds. So I can't really stress it enough, but weed as much as you can the first 2 years, and you'll really feel the, actually, I guess it's not that you'll notice it as much as if you didn't weed. And if you don't weed in 3 years, you'll be like, God damn it, that kind of thing. So anyway, pruning, tip pinching. So tip pinching is basically just pinching out. It's a pruning method of just pinching out the kind of tips of the new growth. This is really common to do with any kind of the sages, but you can do it with most of the native plants will benefit from it. And essentially it's just kind of encouraging the plant to branch out. A lot of times you get a plant from the nursery and it's just got one little stem and maybe a branch. If you just let that guy grow out on his own, sometimes they boom with growth, and they actually get so heavy with growth, they actually can, especially with sages, split down the middle. And so when you tip pinch, you actually encourage a lot of branching to happen. So the plant is kind of strengthened in its structure, and also aesthetically, if you want to have a kind of more bushy plant, that's always good instead of just 3 arms to a plant. Adjusting your smart controller, that's irrigation. Year one, you might have to set the irrigation timer to go off more often, because again, these are newer plants. Typically we say deep and frequent waterings with native plants. That's the goal with a native plant, is you want these nice soaks, but they're infrequent. So you're watering well, but they're infrequent. But in the first year, they are a little more frequent, and you might have to kind of supplement some water because they are so small. Sowing wildflowers, I mentioned that already. And then sweeping and cleaning is a thing you definitely do forever, kind of. But I guess actually to this tip here, cleaning and raking and sweeping or whatever is definitely something you do maybe to clear the pathways, but it's also with native gardens, that layer of mulch that falls free from trees or whatever plant debris or material that falls off or you prune out, you can leave in place. And that will just become the new mulch, you know what I mean? And so that is, there's value in that because it's free, but then you're not it's more sustainable to have less of a, what am I trying to say? Essentially you're not putting it in your green bin and then some truck is coming driving, spending fuel to come pick it up, take it to a place to, compost it or whatever. It's just leave it on site because it is going to act as mulch, which means it's going to conserve the moisture, and it's also going to eventually break down and add carbon to the soil and all that good stuff that we want for our garden. So yeah, I guess that's just a little tangent. I guess it's because there's so many people that love raking leaves, and so it's just a reminder to be you don't have to. Anyway, so the scheduling though for year 2, you can see is a little less frequent. So we've now went from weekly-ish to now maybe set twice a month to monthly, and the visits are a little longer, so maybe 3 to 4 hours per visit. And you can see the garden kind of starts to fill out a bit more. It's not totally filled out. You can still see some mulch, but it's really starting to take its form. And some of the maintenance activities associated with that second year would be, I guess it's just the mention of sowing and planting wildflowers is that wildflowers are just an annual seed. So they're a temporary kind of, a seasonal flower. And unless you let them seed, they're not going to come back year after year. So if you let your poppy seed, they'll probably throw out a bunch of seeds and they'll come back year after year. But if you're removing them before they seed, or your client doesn't want the dead seeded stuff on there, then you might have to sow the wildflowers year after year, because again, year 2 usually it's not so filled out totally. And some people just like the look of wildflowers, obviously, so you just would be doing that regularly. You do have to water wildflowers more frequently and often, and that's because wildflowers are adapted to our rainy seasons. They basically receive, on a good rainy year, that's when we have wildflowers, and that's because they're getting regular watering and then they can sprout. So that's what you're trying to emulate, like a nice scattering shower of water and at sort of regular intervals until they germinate and then flower. So sorry, I just saw that Laura asked, how much does the carbon from the leaf debris contribute? Is it enough to supplement fertilization? Yeah, basically, yes, it's enough. I don't know exactly how much because I don't get into it that much detail. Like I don't know exactly how many whatever CO2, whatever things it is, but that is the plan. You're not, I guess I could have mentioned that in year 1. We don't typically suggest people add fertilizer to native plants. It's unnecessary. A lot of people do anyway because they just want that fast growth right away, but honestly, you'll still see some boom of growth even without fertilizer. Native plants are adapted to very low fertility soils, so they are fine without it. And the mulch that falls naturally is exactly what they're used to in terms of fertilization. That's all they are used to. So that's the perfect amount, is just to leave whatever falls from leaf particles and leaf matter and whatnot. Even actually, sometimes fertilizing native plants, you'll see that boom of growth, but sometimes what it does is actually shorten the life of the plant, because it's kind of like, what is that? Like burn hot, die young, whatever. I don't know. So one of those things. It's basically like that. You're kind of like shortening the lifespan of the plant. Not always, but I have seen it happen. Year 2, tip pinching, you'll want to continue with that to keep getting that like nice branching structure of your plants, and it'll really benefit years down the line. You can start cutting back grasses. So those kind of bunching grasses, usually by year 2, you can cut them back. You'll usually do that like, I don't know, 1 to 2 times a year. It definitely depends on what kind of grass you have. And we'll get into that when we talk about pruning. Also shearing and hedging, you'll want to start doing that, because that'll start giving that, like the right-hand side of this photo, top right, there's like a hedge there. So you want to start doing that in the second year to give them that form, because that's the hedge needs to have that kind of like that specific type of cut. Watering, by second year, you are going to start reducing the irrigation frequency in that second summer. So now the plants are hitting their second summer, and you should definitely be reducing the frequency. You still want to have a nice deep kind of soak. So you want enough water to like wet that top 18 inches in one irrigation event. So you'll want to wet it down really well, but maybe you'll have less frequent. So maybe it went from doing it once a week in the first summer, or maybe every 2 weeks, to every 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, something like that. That's kind of what you should be considering tapering off in the summer. And also, yeah, check your irrigation. You always want to check your irrigation, leaks and whatever, but also checking to make sure that it's appropriately watering your plants and there's not like excessive runoff. Like, don't just set the timer and be like, okay, that's enough to put down 18 inches. But if it's just running off and flooding the pathways, then you're not really watering it appropriately. And yes, of course, adjusting your smart controller is always on there, because again, you might want to reduce the frequency in the summer of the second year. There's year 2 here is repair-based activities. So this is like maybe if you're having issues or whatever. So if something is not thriving, it's really not taking off. It looks like the exact same size it was when you put it in the ground, and looks almost identical, maybe a little worse than when you put it in the ground last year. that's when you would consider culling that plant, or maybe transplanting it. I mean, it depends on the situation. Maybe replanting it with something else. This is, again, some plant, if you want to make sure you're picking the right plant for the right location. That's definitely like a refrain you hear native plant people say all the time, which is just like, pick the right plant for the right location. So you might have to replant something that just is like, you realize, wow, this is a sun-loving plant and this is just too shady of a spot for it, or something like that. So you definitely, replanting will happen in the year 2. Weeding, of course, like I said before, stay on top of it. I can't stress it enough. Just the first and second year are so big for weeding. So stay on top of it. Remulching, only like if you put down a good 2 to 3 inches, it should be enough for the lifetime of the garden. If you put down 3 or 4, should be enough. But a lot of times you'll see like rain or irrigation even like creates runoff, or the wind or something, because there's so much exposed mulch that it actually starts to like you start losing it for whatever reason, maybe like wind, or like a I don't know what I'm trying to think of, but like for whatever reason you might be losing mulch in an unnatural way, and in that case you might want to remulch. You definitely don't want exposed soil, so anytime you see exposed soil, definitely remulch it. But it's not necessary for the plants to have like a new application of soil if you already have that 2 or 3 inches there. The staking, at this point, you might want to move the stake out a bit further on any plants that had those 2 stakes that, accommodate for the size of the plant, or you might be able to just take it out completely if the plant, its trunk is nice and, you can feel that it's pretty sturdy. You could probably just remove the stake completely, but obviously depends on the situation. And then annually, you'll always be cleaning whatever rain swales or infiltration basin, rain gardens, what have you, before the rainy season. So I recommend whatever outlet or inlet you have for that rain garden, check those, make sure they're not blocked, make sure it's functional for when the rain comes. So like if you have a downspout that connects to your dry riverbed, make sure the downspout from the gutters doesn't have a big blocking thing in front of it or something like that. Just make sure that it's going to be functional when the rain arrives, because it's just like a total waste if it's going the wrong way or something's blocking it. Okay, year 3. Sticking with the same kind of scheduling, it might be a little less frequent. Maybe you were doing semi-monthly, now you can move to monthly. But again, just so you understand that like the first year is the most frequent, and the subsequent years a little less frequent. So you're maybe doing monthly visits at this point, or maybe twice a month. And again, maybe 3 to 4 hours. You're really going to start to notice, well, so the 3rd year, like we said, is like that leap year. You're going to start to see, a more full looking garden. And you're also, the scheduling is going to become a bit more seasonal. So that means like, you're just going to start to notice like the seasonal pattern of the garden. So like in this case, there's a lot of flowers here and all these bushy plants, and those are all going to need to be deadheaded. If the client wants that kind of aesthetic, which a lot of them do. Not everybody is down with like the dry, crispy, spent flowers, but some people are like, yes, I want them for birds and whatnot. But that might be something where you're like, okay, I'm going to need a couple days to fully clear out and deadhead all of this stuff. So that might be something that you're starting to see as seasonal pushes, like where you do several days in a row of, deadheading. So maybe it's, obviously you're not doing a monthly visit there, you're doing 2 or 3, but it's like all at one time. That also could happen with, maybe a rainy season, maybe with a bunch of new weeds coming up. You might want to like have a couple days of like clearing out the weeds. And so, yeah, you'll start to see more of a seasonal kind of vibe to the garden, or even just pruning. In a mature garden, if there's a heavy pruning situation with a garden, it's going to be a seasonal thing. You'll be like, oh, okay, it's fall, I got to do a heavy prune in this garden. And that's just part of its kind of nature. So year 3 activities. Okay, yeah, so the scheduling is kind of similar to before, and activities are sort of similar too. But one of the main things I think by year 3 is that, like I said, you're going to start to see the kind of full form of the plants. They're really going to be almost like, most of them will be their full size or very close to it. And it's also when because of that, you're going to notice like any overcrowding, which is very common. It's overplanting. And that's because we get so excited and nobody wants to just look at like a bare garden with just mulch. So typically folks, make the error of overplanting, or maybe they did it intentionally, knowing they would have to pull out some later. But at this point, by year 3, you'll be able to tell like, okay, wow, this is crowded. I need to pull this one, or selectively prune out or replant to a different area certain plants. Overcrowding will be really obvious by year 3 is, I guess, my point. And especially like in a situation where maybe a ground cover, like a pigeon point, like a Baccharis pilularis pigeon point, it's a ground cover. But if you plant them too close together, because they want a good amount of lateral movement. So if you plant them too close together, they won't move laterally, they'll just go upwards. So you'll actually have created this like weird lumpy hedge thing instead of the ground cover look that maybe you were going for. So it is important to remove plants when they're getting crowded, not just because like it's also for their health or also for aesthetics, but sometimes, it's too crowded, not enough airflow, and you have like more fungal issues. It's not just like for aesthetics, it is also for the plant's health. So you'll notice any kind of overcrowding, pull stuff accordingly. Year 3, you shouldn't need to remulch. By this point, again, it would just be if something unnatural, it sounds so weird to say unnatural, I can't think of another word. Anyway, if something, for whatever reason is happening, that you're losing your mulch and you have an exposed zone, yes, remulch, but it shouldn't be necessary at this point because the plants should be large enough to be actually shading the ground. So they're actually acting as a mulch almost, and they'll start shedding their own little plant materials. So once they start to kind of like basically touch each other and fully cover the ground with their vegetation, you really shouldn't need to mulch very often. But if you have an exposed zone, yeah, go ahead, go for it. Pruning, definitely, like I said, we will have to do some pruning, especially if you have a lot of overgrown plants or crowding. You'll have to, or like this maybe is really crowding the pathway potentially. If the client doesn't like that, you'd have to do some pruning for overgrowth or whatever. That's just going to be kind of a normal thing. And then of course there's the cleaning the rain soils again. Replanting, I guess did I mention that already? Essentially, replanting is pretty standard. If something's not working in a spot, either replace like with like, or maybe you should consider like, okay, this is dappled sunlight. Maybe this plant isn't appropriate for this zone and maybe I should find something else. But replanting is just kind of going to be a forever activity. Weeding, at this point by year 3, weeds should be way less of an issue, especially if you were staying on top of it in years 1 and 2. This should be more like, it should just be a lot easier at this point. And maybe you have some stubborn Bermuda grass patches or something in the whatever annual crop of weeds that come up, but you should really start to notice at least like less weeds, especially because the plants will be taking up more space. So the native plants should be out competing the weeds. Laura said, should we consider the mature size of the plants prior to planting to help with overcrowding? Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. This is kind of where sometimes design and maintenance don't communicate, but I would definitely encourage that unless the client is aware that you like maybe because essentially if you do the appropriate spacing from day 1, it does look pretty bare on day 1 essentially, because they have 3 or 4 feet spacing on a lot of our native plants. So sometimes folks are just like, I want it to look more full now, and so you overplant for that case. But then your issue is that by year 3 you definitely have to cull plants. So it's just something to keep in mind. Yes, and definitely we will talk about like different sizes plants and what's appropriate where throughout the course. But I would definitely, personally, I kind of am like, I'd rather not have to do extra steps of like killing a plant or removing it. And I'd rather just try to educate the client up front about like, hey, it's gonna look bare for a year, but trust me, it'll be booming in like 2. So just trying to like, that's also a real important part of educating clients. Like, it's not like a, they don't have the huge amount of growth, and like kind of teaching them about that first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap, because that really helps people understand why it's a little bit bare. Okay, what else? Weeding, watering, I think same. You're just, at this point starting to, year 3 is kind of like when we're starting to consider them established. Can be year 3 or 4. It's, they're plants, they're not like They're not robots. So it can, by year 3, you should be getting into the kind of routine of the watering schedule that is more for mature established garden, and or you're just watering less frequently, like we said, at this point in time. And checking your smart controllers, same, adjusting accordingly. Year 4, similarly, semi-monthly to monthly, or with, kind of 3 to 4 hour visits, or just as the client requires. Maybe some folks are just want quarterly visits, or maybe just come, twice a year. So by year 4, we consider it, established garden. The plants should be able to take longer stretches of time without waterings, and they should be kind of on a good schedule. And so you too can kind of be on a good, easier schedule because they're more predictable at this phase. And the activities you would associate with year 4 would be mostly just monitoring the garden and garden and irrigation, make sure there's no leaks and, stuff, the irrigation system is working appropriately like you expect it to. There's no mineral residue clogging up the drip irrigation or whatever. And looking, monitoring for any fungal diseases or dying plants, whatever, this kind of standard kind of gardening thing. And then also by year 4, you might be doing the larger pruning cuts, because in the earlier years, you're doing the standard kind of, cutting back the grasses, deadheading, tip pinching, things like that. But then once you get into the larger kind of cuts, because you have larger trees, like in this example here, you see these on the right-hand side, there's a plant there with a branch that maybe you don't want it to kind of be getting into the pathway like that, or you anticipate it getting larger or something like that. So you're starting to kind of make larger cuts on the larger plants, and also having a more long-term vision with the pruning cuts. So more long-term planning and shaping when you're pruning. In the first couple of years, usually you're just trying to get it up to size, get a larger plant bigger. And in the later, more mature gardens, your pruning starts to include managing shaping. So maybe if you have a lopsided thing, like maybe the plant on the left is going too far to the right and I want it to go to the left, then I'm going to start to think about, okay, I'm going to remove these right-hand ones and make sure that the growth is going more left and timing it appropriately so we get reinvigorating pruning cuts and things like that. So the pruning becomes a little more I guess nuanced and a little more specific and with a long-term vision. Let's see, was there anything else I want to say about year 4? I don't think so. It's just, weeding at this point should be really easy, and it should just be whatever annual crop comes with the rain, and maybe an occasional gnarly patch of Bermuda grass or something like that. But weeding should be pretty simple at this point. Replanting, like I've said, in probably every year, is just part of it. And so some plants are shorter lived than others. Like I said, the wildflowers, they only live 1 year. That's part of their, their nature. And some plants only live for 5 years. So in 5 years' time, you got to replant them. And so that'll just be kind of like a normal part of the garden, just replanting ones. And when you're replanting those plants, you kind of have to start over again with the watering. You have to be hand watering those new ones, and you can't just have them on the same watering schedule as the established garden. So whenever you replant a new plant, you have to make sure that you're doing that irrigation program of essentially more frequent early on and then slowly tapering it off. So that'll be kind of like your rotating cast of plants also will associate with your irrigation method for the different zones. Also, that I don't know if I mentioned this, but I really recommend zoning your plants by kind of type. So typically the shady or loving plants maybe like a little more, well, I don't want to say that because there are exceptions, but maybe a plant that likes a bit more water, you want to plant other plants that like water with it, so zone it that way so that when you're watering it, they're all happy with the extra water. And maybe the drier, less, drought or more drought tolerant plants you plant together so that you're not accidentally overwatering the neighbor when he doesn't like water, but the other one does. You want to zone your plants accordingly. So trying to put like with like, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next class when you have your flashcards, which are very cool because they show you the watering needs, like with this little symbology, they have the watering needs of plants. So you can kind of put like with like. And I really recommend you zone them that way, even with an irrigation system. If you have a different, different valves for different areas, make one kind of the heavy watering zone and one the drier zone. And that'll go a long way to making irrigation a bit easier. So you don't have to be like, oh, this guy doesn't like it and this one does. Let's see, what else? Replanting, water, check irrigation, same. I believe you can, I think I have, I do. I have a video. So just since we're not in person, this is probably the best case scenario, but if you could probably ask whoever is teaching the in-person workshop to do this for you in person if you need it. But this is Tim Becker. He's the horticulture director at Theodore Payne Foundation. He's just going to explain how to prepare and plant like a native plant. So just press play. Just let me, somebody stop me if they can't hear it, but it should work.
So I've selected a well-adapted California native plant for my particular site conditions. In this case, it's Salvia Baja Blanca, which is well suited and will thrive in our well-draining soil in mixed sunlight. It's kind of a part sunlight condition. So now that I have my plant and I know where I'm going to plant it, I'm going to prepare the site. I'm going to clear any weeds away. I'm going to dig my hole, which you're going to do with a round edge shovel or whatever you're comfortable with. And you're going to want that hole to be about twice as big as the can or the plant that you're planting. So in this case, a 1 gallon plant, I'm going to dig about a 2 gallon size hole. So this soil's nice and friable. It's really loose. This part of the garden has a lot of decomposed granite. So I have my hole dug right now, and I can tell just by handling the soil that it's fairly dry. It doesn't have a lot of moisture in it. When I ball it up, it's not holding together at all. So it's fairly dry. So I'm going to want to hydrate the hole by filling my hole, again, twice as big as my gallon, with a couple gallons of water and letting that drain out. Now, this is another way to do the soil test. You would fill this hole with water and measure how long it takes to drain out. Faster it drains, the more sandy or coarse your soil is. So we have our hole dug and we've let the water drain out. Now it's time to place the plant inside the planting hole to measure your depth. Now, you can backfill at this point, and you definitely want to make sure that the plant is at or slightly above the level of the soil. So I can tell here that I need to backfill. My plant's too low, so that's all right. I can take that out. Backfilling, make sure that you don't include any rocks in the bottom of your hole if you need to raise the height a little bit. So I have the right height. I'm going to pop that plant out, and I've selected a really good plant with nice, well-developed roots, not girdled. I'm going to place that plant at the base of the hole right there, and then I'm going to backfill. When I get about halfway full, I like to compact down a little bit. We're pushing out the air. Again, it's all about its root to soil contact, which we want to be very high so that the plant can access water and nutrients in the soil. So again, I'm going to pack down a bit, and now that I'm pretty much right at the level of the plant, what I'm going to do next is build a little berm with some remaining soil, and I'm going to leave that berm up for a couple months to maybe a year, depending.
Okay, so yeah, that's I just saw in the chat. I believe, Anna, you asked a while back if you recommend, or if I recommend planting, watering the hole and after planting it, additionally watering it also after. Gosh, that was a really wordy way of trying to rephrase your question. But essentially, yes, you water the hole, and after you plant it, you also water the plant in. And the watering the hole is for basically to moisten the soil around the plant. And once you put that soil back in, after you planted it, the dry soil, you want, like how Tim mentioned, you want this soil to water contact. And essentially that is what you do when you water it above. So you're actually watering the root ball and connecting water onto to the root ball and to the next door soil type of thing. Sorry, that was kind of wordy. I think the time changed. I'm like, now I'm getting tired officially. Anyway, so yeah, so you do want to water the hole and also water the plant afterwards. And usually actually with the first watering at install, you water it kind of more than it seems right. You know, like you're kind of over watering it that first watering to make sure it's like nice and contacted with water in all areas. So typically we say like 5 gallons for every 1 gallon of plant that you've planted. So if you're planting a 1 gallon plant, you put down 5 gallons when you're watering it that first time, and typically at least that, if not more. So okay, so lastly, we'll just do kind of like a quick exercise to go over some of the, basically what we just talked about. We have an example garden here, and this is just, you guys can, basically participate and give me a break from talking. And essentially, we're just going to look at an example of a garden that starts from install to a little over 2 years old. And I just want you guys to be chiming in what you think you should do each year with this garden. What are some of the activities, as we mentioned, just a little bit ago, what are some activities you would suggest for the garden that we have here as an example? And some things you would be thinking about, maybe just anything you're noting, even if you're like, I'm not sure what this means, but I'm noticing this. Just a little backstory. So this is a former participant of the native plant tour, garden tour that Theodore Payne does. This is a north-facing yard. And let's see, what else was there to this? This is at install. So this is obviously, you can see all the plants are laid out. They actually did a very unique kind of situation where they dug out a big portion of the soil, like a couple inches. I don't know if you can see on that left-hand photo, it's actually lower than grade. And they replaced it with, like, I think a couple different layers of DG and some other kind of drainagey soils. I can't remember the details, but essentially they replaced it with some kind of high draining, basically mulch, like DG is a mulch, technically not an organic mulch. In fact, this yard does not and did not qualify for the turf replacement program because of that. You have to put the organic mulch, which is the shredded kind of wood chips look. So anyway, this participant replaced the DG, and that's what those 2 mounds of dirt are, and then they planted into that. So this is install. What are some of the activities you guys would think about doing, or some of the things that you might consider, or maybe what you don't see here, but you would do differently? And feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, write it in the chat, whatever.
I was thinking that I would like maybe create like a bioswale or do like hugelkultur, just give it some layers or levels.
Yeah, like right now it's really just sloping straight to the street, and you're not going to capture any extra moisture because there's not a depression in the ground to capture it. So yeah, there's kind of like a lost opportunity there. That's another reason I believe it wouldn't qualify for the turf replacement program, because that's a requirement, is to have some kind of rainwater capturing feature. So yeah, I think that would be great. And it's also really helpful for the plants. Anyone else, like, even like what would be the watering schedule, or, even if it's just review of what I said, I just want to know if you guys took anything away from it.
And the watering schedule would be like, I think every week for the first few months.
Yeah, I would think it would be more frequent. It is north facing, but it is very high draining because we know they put that DG in. I don't know what kind of soil they have below that, but it is north facing. So it, at least in the winter months, and I believe this was planted, I'm pretty sure that, yeah, this was planted in fall. I didn't say that. But the winter months on a north facing yard would mean that they're in the shade most of the day. So at least it might, if it's a clay soil and they're in shade, I would maybe say you didn't have to do it every week, but it is pretty high draining. And yeah, you know, there's that to consider. But yeah, definitely more frequently than in their future.
Looks a little crowded to me.
Yeah, it could be a pretty crowded. So yeah, especially if any of these plants are going to get up to like 5 feet or even 3 feet, like it's going to look very dense, which may be the goal, but it's definitely like, I look at that too and I think, is this intentional, or like, do you want it to be really dense? Because some people, or sometimes when it gets really dense looking, it can look chaotic, but other people find that kind of wild aesthetic nice. So definitely, yeah, that would be something I would, you know, just want to follow up on.
Oh, is that in actuality, is that a homeowner's home that was built this way, or is this just for show, for picture?
No,
That's what I'm
this is a
thinking.
definite, no, I have more pictures of it as it ages. So yes, this is definitely a participant of the native plant garden tour. They used to have lawn, and yeah, no, this is a real situation.
That's what I was thinking, the overcrowded.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of rainwater catching system?
No, there is not.
No bases, no.
But yeah, something that could be considered. Laura put in the chat, I would move plant material in from sidewalk and driveway based on the mature spacing.
True.
Oh, I see what you mean. So like move it further away from the sidewalk. Is that what, I think that's what you mean. So that like, it's not going to crowd over on the sidewalk. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see if there's anything else. Obviously sowing wildflowers, if it's, you know, it is kind of crowded, but it is going to look bare even, you know, the first year. That's an option instead of overcrowding it. Maybe remove some of the plants and then sow some wildflowers to fill it in if that's what they're concerned about. That's another option.
Try spacing them out more. There's an empty space, right? Big empty space here.
Yeah, right, like right in front, or like at least on our side of the picture. It's pretty empty looking, if that's what unless they're putting something there.
Wondering if they're going to put mulch in there.
They actually don't put mulch, and they are using this DG, which actually the right hand photo is the mulch they use. So it's an inorganic mulch, but this is what they used as mulch instead of the organic one. So it's not as effective in terms of it's higher draining, but it's not as effective in terms of well, it doesn't break down over time and release, you know, kind of like add carbon to the soil. So it's not more effective in that way. It does act as conserving soil moisture, but a little less so than the organic mulch. Well, okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Oh yeah, also Anna, you said reduce amount of plants and stay on top of pinching to create spread. Yes, thank you, Anna, for mentioning that. Tip pinching, really huge in the first year of the plant's life. And so definitely doing that, especially if there's some sages involved, I would do the tip pinching. This is the time to do it. So here is like 6 to 9 months later. What do you guys have? Any comments about this one? You know, now you can see it's kind of grown in. This is probably late spring because you can see there's a lot of poppies. So they did put plenty of wildflowers out. And so this is kind of a springtime this situation, 6 to 9 months in. And what do you guys see or have comments about this situation?
Do you want to start cleaning them out as they're overgrowing?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
They're overgrowing. Do you want to trim them up a little bit?
Yeah, so it's pretty dense in terms of like poppies. Everything's very low growing, which kind of makes sense because it's still only 6 to 9 months old. But
more for the driveway and the sidewalk.
Yeah, it looks like they're hitting the sidewalk, and if they don't like that, then I would want to clear that up. What about like in a few months when these poppies are all dried up and have a bunch of seed heads? What would you be considering there? Anyone, not just
start deadheading.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of deadheading involved with these poppies, at least. Also with poppies, since they die back completely, typically, you're going to have to cut them back to the ground. So you can leave that on top if he wants that mulch, but if he wants to see his DG mulch, you'd have to clear all of that, either cut it back to the ground and, put it in your green bin. But that's definitely something I would be thinking about in the future. Like, wow, that's a lot of deadheading that might be coming up.
I think that a pretty cool idea would have been to create separate planters in the beds instead of it just being just like a bed of just poppies, creating a walkway and also adding, like boulders, a feature,
Yeah.
so at least it looks a little bit more eye appealing just because it just looks like a lot of, like if it was just a bunch of weeds.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could confuse this with like just weeds that didn't know what
Right.
native plants are. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Adding some kind of feature like a boulder or even like a pathway, like you said, it kind of breaks it up and maybe aesthetically would make it look a little less, potentially like wild looking, which if he likes that wildscape, like maybe a meadow look, I could totally understand it. But yeah, it's something that you would want to ask about.
Yeah, because I know I've seen this type of landscape, and if you add like I believe Natasha said, add like a bioswale.
Yeah.
Even if it was just a big bioswale and they added like the seeds in between the rocks, it'll come up and it'll look really nice in between the rocks. I mean, you have a feature and it looks actually presentable compared to having just a whole bed of poppies, which is really good. I mean, ideally having a bunch of poppies like that is really good for the wildlife.
Right.
It just looks kind of weird in front of somebody's house.
Totally. I think, it's having kind of a intentional, like if it's just following the swale or if it's, amongst some rocks, it can sometimes just aesthetically make it like, I don't know, just a little more cleaned up and a little bit more, intentional looking, as opposed to this is like more of a meadow. Enna says, I agree, it comes off very flat. Yes, that's a great way to explain it. Even with a meadow, there's more depth. I think a swale and boulders are a good idea. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so some of you guys like have mentioned, like visually, it's maybe not what some of us are excited about. And yeah, even as a meadow, there could be some topography that would make it look more interesting and less flat. What about anything? Oh, let's see.
Maybe
Well, I had a question. Like, I can't tell if there's like weeds in there or not, and some of the plants are blending in because like it doesn't look like some of the plants were burned.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did not berm them. So you can't, I think actually what this ends up being is like, this would be a pain in the ass to weed because you really have to like see what's a poppy and what's a plant. And because there's no kind of more formal, like not even formal, but like, swale or something that dictates like where the planting areas are, you're like left with having to weed the entire thing and very like, getting into the weeds literally with it. So this one feels like to me, like if I would be like, oh, this is more hours of weeding because it's so like dense. So definitely not like my favorite thing to look at in terms of like having to deal with the potential weeds. And the berms definitely aren't on the plants. So there's just kind of a lost opportunity for catching water. And that might also be a reason why you can kind of see in this picture, there's almost like a bare spot here. That might be why, it's very exposed at that point. And from here, this way is mostly shaded in the winter. So this might actually be quite exposed and just drying out. And maybe with some berm or a bioswale, this would be like the greenest area. So definitely, definitely all good points. How would you adjust the irrigation schedule at this point? Wait, there's one above that, sorry. And hard to tell, but not much mulch. Yes, the mulch definitely, like I was saying, so mulch can be rocks too. Mulch is just anything you put on top of the soil, but typically when we say mulch, we mean that organic wooded or shredded wood chips look. So organic mulch is anything that is like that. But inorganic mulches can be things like DG. So it's just anything you put on top of the existing soil. So here there is a mulch, but it's DG. And but it's not, doesn't qualify for the rebate program. And maybe it's not the most effective for holding soil in. Also, soil seems exposed. Yeah, exactly. Also seems like low diversity for birds, insects, etc. habitat during the flowering nectar season. Yeah, there's a lot of poppies, but maybe not a lot else. Okay, and then your question was, how do you adjust the irrigation schedule at this point? So yeah, if this is not quite the second year, so I would still be, this is probably like, getting into summer. So I would still be watering in the summer. And again, depends on, you always want to check your soil, and we'll talk about this in the irrigation class. But if I'm noticing that the soil is drying out, every week, a couple inches down, then I would be still watering once a week, in the summer. So this is still within the first year. So I would still be, because even though we can't see them well amongst the poppies, there are some perennial plants in here, that are going to size up. So I'm going to move to the next picture, but this one is 1.5 years later. So this is like basically 2 years. Now we're at the 2-year point, so now we're kind of starting to see the poppies aren't, you see a couple of them with their things closed, their flowers closed, but mostly we're starting to see the plants, and we're kind of starting to see what they planted. What are your guys' impressions now?
Road. I feel like it looks like some areas get more water than other areas. So like you see the bottom, yeah, some of the lower level looks really dry compared to the top portion of the house.
Totally. Yeah. It's like definitely way more dense and like even bigger growth, more growth, like larger plants on the top half and then the bottom half. So definitely that would be something where I would be like, okay, we need to address this irrigation issue because it's not even for sure. Because there's the same plants just below and maybe they're just not thriving in the same way. So definitely, yeah, something to address with potentially irrigation.
No, that the look that we're going for?
Did you say was that the look they were going for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know, I've talked to this person and they were going for like a meadow look. So that was something that he was interested in. But I'm not sure if he exactly wanted it like this. You know what I mean?
It could be the angles too that we're looking at them. Maybe
Yeah,
won't
I
show
know
there
it's
on the
hard with
flat.
just pictures. It'd be so much fun to be
Right.
able to do this in person and like way more interesting. But anything else you guys might notice like about this?
I think with it being north facing and having all that shadow, you want to create zones within that
Great
yard.
point. Thank you, Julio. Sorry, were you going to say something else? Did I interrupt you?
Yeah, like, have 4 zones, 2 zones in the back, 2 zones in the front, so you can adjust the watering during the sunny, the areas that are in shade most of the time, lower the watering there and then have more watering.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking. That's one way to address the watering differential that we're seeing kind of from the top and the bottom. That top part is most likely and is the kind of shadier part. So maybe like that zone is more for shadier, different plant palette, and then you create a different palette for the lower half, or so that you have like, different irrigation zones, and they actually just work on their own with the shade naturally. So like, yes, thank you I love that you brought that point up, because there is a way to work with that shade. You can actually utilize it in a way and then make it maybe look more uniform in that, or maybe more diverse instead of like kind of a step down from like what's happening on this side and what versus that side.
What time of year is this?
This one is like, I believe this is now like fallish winter, because wait, I have the dates. Let me see. Fall, later. Yeah, so this is about like winter, spring.
Okay, yeah, because like one thing I struggle with is like picking out plants that, flower at different times of year and not just in the springtime. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that later during the course.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of there's only, I think, one plant that's flowering.
Yeah, for sure. So especially if it's winter, you tend to see quite a bit of greenery and not a lot of plants flower in winter. Maybe like a manzanita, Arctostaphylos, they start to kind of flower in winter, right when it gets kind of moist or cool. But yeah, not a lot of, this could be winter. It's hard because I just have the time frames. I don't actually have the exact dates, but yeah, if it's winter, maybe the flowers are coming on. There are some poppies. It's kind of pixelated for me, but probably you guys too. But I can see some orange little dots there. So that means the poppies are probably coming, but so yeah, probably end of winter-ish, maybe early spring. And oh yeah, Brenda, thank you for mentioning that. The flashcards actually that you get with this course, it's so awesome. We'll talk about it next class, but they have basically parts like a little section that shows when things are blooming. And yeah, and then there's penstemon, which is awesomely flowering right there in the right-hand photo in the bottom left corner, that like pinkish, that's a penstemon. So maybe they could have planted more of those or something to get more flowering. What about weeding? Nobody's really mentioned any weeding in this situation.
How about thinning out? Oh, sorry.
There you go. Go ahead, Anna.
How about thinning out some of the foliage? It seems like a lot of them are very thick. It might, depending on what time it is, or if this is the look they're going for, some of the plants look very dense.
Yeah.
Maybe thinning out and, you know, preparing for airing out and new growth to come in.
Yeah, so, and this is only in the second year and they're already pretty dense, at least in this top photo. So it may be overcrowded like we suspected in that first photo. A lot of you guys mentioned like it looked overcrowded. So this is kind of what it looks like when you put plants that close together. And that's, I think, an important part of seeing them over time, is that it might look like not that many plants in the install, but then knowing that only by year 2, it's already this dense, and we still have year 3 where they're gonna still put on more growth. So yeah, I would be suspecting this is an overcrowded garden that you're gonna have to deal with either this year or the next year, for sure. And that you might want to take care of that now, or, you know, wait. But this little, I have my cursor here. There's like a stone, I don't know what these are, kind of things here, but this seems to be like weeds growing in from the edge of this driveway that I would be concerned about. And it's the second year, like I said, they look like they're taking a little stronghold here. So like I would be wanting to get on top of that ASAP. And there's some grasses here, bunching grasses that are they're looking like they're starting to dry out. So maybe in a little bit more time, once they're a little bit more dry, you could cut them back. It depends if they're a cool or warm season grass, but you would be cutting them back to refresh them already in the second year. You can start doing that.
Does the meadow look like this house looks? Do people ever complain about rodents?
Oh, because of its like kind of wild look?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised, because I think a lot of people are uneducated about native plants, and I could see them being like, this is a problem. And a lot of people don't even like this aesthetic, you know, and maybe if there was like a homeowners association, this could be a problem. It's not in that situation, but I could see that being an issue if you had a more strict homeowners association deal about your planting situation. So yeah, good point. Like, is it aesthetically pleasing for your neighbors, and does that matter to you or to the community? You know what I mean? Like, how important is that? Because yeah, it's like you do also want to present it as in the best way possible so people don't complain or whatever, you know. Let me see if I have any other notes. I'll just go to the last one. Am I almost done? Oh yeah, look at me. This is now a little over 2 years old, and this is definitely springtime. You can see all the poppies, and it's very, very full. And there's also the baby blue eyes, which is another native wildflower. It's that kind of bluer one. So it's very filled out right now. Any kind of comments here? Looking at this zone that I pointed out again, obviously they didn't do anything about the weeds, which I'm upset about. And it's getting established. So this weeded zone didn't get weeded last year because we saw it a little less than this, and now it's taking a stronghold. So like, again, staying on top of the weeds, can't emphasize it enough. Any other kind of comments or?
Yeah, it looks like they didn't give any attention to any sort of increasing or decreasing height or depth. So just sort of like the whole site is kind of flat and bland to begin with. You also see like there's sort of tall shrubs scattered throughout and short stuff scattered throughout, and there's no real sort of depth of view. And there's definitely those look like white sage or something that are right next to the sidewalk over there by the curb.
Yeah, great point, because it's like there you can see some shorter stuff behind the taller things, at least from the sidewalk point of view. So it's like, who can really even see that? And so, yeah, in terms of like structure, in fact, I think I didn't mention it, but somebody else said something, the height, yeah, height variation is a lot more attractive. Oh, it says once the plants started growing in. But yeah, so there is a little bit more differential, but now as it's like, you know, in the second year, I'm sorry, a little over the second year, moving into the third year, it's like still pretty flat, even though it's a little bit differentiated. Maybe it's about placement, like you were saying, like putting the larger things behind the shorter stuff, and then you actually create like a depth of field there. And then Enna said, it looks like wildflowers are taking over the middle part. Not sure how that will affect the perennials. So yeah, definitely the wildflowers, I mean, once they die back, they'll probably expose that kind of bare area again that we saw in the other photos. I'm sure they're just taking over whatever bare area there is. So they typically don't really do much to the perennials at this stage, because you can see that they're a bit mostly larger than them. The grasses look like they're probably cool season grasses because they're green, and this is the cooler part of the season since I know there's poppies here. So these are cool season grasses, which means they're greening up at that point. So you would have trimmed them back kind of more in the warm season. So maybe before they boomed up. But definitely not now. You don't need to trim them now.
Yeah, like a lack of trimming, like in the winter, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like winter before it gets like some rain, you would trim them so they can get like a nice bush or a pump of green growth. Yeah, and then Brenda said, based on flower color, I'd say they are attracting many different pollinators. And that's the thing, now you're seeing a lot of flowers. And that's the why also it's important not to like kind of judge things right off their one look on that first year, because now there is quite a bit of flower variation, whereas the first year there really wasn't. So, so yeah, it's kind of, I think it's interesting to see that, because sometimes we think like, oh, this isn't working at this level, but it's just developing, because these are dynamic gardens that actually mature over time. So it's important for us to keep in mind that it is going to change. And there's also that part you want to educate clients on, because they don't, they're not going to look like what they look like in the first year and the third year. So having that in mind when you're planting them, like, maybe this was the vision he had in mind. And if it is, then he succeeded, you know? So it's interesting to know that. Natasha, you said still looks pretty compared to the neighbor's yard and very wild look, if that's what the owner was going for. Exactly. Yeah. Did they sow more seeds this year versus first, or just first year? I don't know the answer to that. I've actually been wondering that myself, but I don't know. One cool thing before I wrap up, since it's the end of class, but one really cool thing about this garden, and I believe it's because of the DG, and something that I didn't even think about with it is that, because I saw this garden in person on a really warm day, and it's really rad. There's like hundreds of, like, I want to say thousands, but there were so many native, what's it called? Like soil dwelling bees going in and out of this landscape. I mean, like thousands, so many of them, and they dig into the ground. And it's because there's so much of this kind of bare soil, and they really like this landscape. Whereas the organic mulch actually covers the soil and they can't really get under the ground. So one of the unique things in person that I noticed with this garden, that like maybe it's not that like impressive to us right now, or maybe it wasn't to me in pictures, but the most impressive thing was just this like highway of native bees. So there are cool other aspects that we can't really touch and see in the photos, of course. But on that note, it is 7 o'clock. So we should wrap it up. If anyone has any questions, like I can stay on for a little bit longer to answer them. But basically on Friday, we will talk about plant ID. And if you can get your cards, your flashcards, because it can be really helpful to follow along with them. If you can't get them, you can still do the class without them. It's no big deal. But yeah, that's basically it. And I will see you guys Friday.
Yeah, but you will need them for the homework.
Yes,
so,
true. Homework, you will need them.
So try and get them before the third class at least. So I've been getting emails asking about when you can pick up cards. You can pick them up anytime that we have staff at Theodore Payne. That is Tuesday through Saturday, 8:30 to 4. This week is crazy. I'm doing a couple classes. I will not be in until past noon, which means I'll be here later in the evening. I can leave them on the porch, but staff will be in the main building, and they have a list of everyone that needs to pick up cards. So I think that's everything I have. So
I just
cards,
realized I didn't share the homework with you guys.
It's not too late. While you bring that up, we'll talk about bees.
So you want to take 3 pictures of native plants. If you don't know, don't worry. It's going to be helpful to have unidentified plants too. So just take 3 pictures of plants that you suspect to be natives and send them to my email here, which is, I'm going to put in the chat, but it's also in yellow. And because we're going to use them for next class's plant ID class. So we can utilize the pictures that you send in. So please try to send them to me as soon as possible. At least like, I probably won't be able to put them into the homework if you're sending them on like Friday afternoon. So try to get them to me as soon as possible. And remember that the homework is listed in the class outline if you ever forget.
Okay. So I want to hear more about those bees. Fun fact, California has over 1,000 species of native bees. They're independent, they don't colonize, and they're usually not as aggressive as those colonizer European bees.
Exactly. That's why that garden is like the cool, like it was so much cooler to me when I saw it in person. I was like,
when you see a flower, think, oh my God, that's like insect candy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, they loved the DG and they loved all those wildflowers. I was like, this is awesome, actually. So anyway, guys, yeah, see you on Friday and have a good evening and nice meeting everybody virtually. And yeah, class 1 down.
That's right. Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.